Good morning, good afternoon,
صباح
good
الخير
evening to everyone around the world in all
وسعيد
time
بالمساء
zones.
مع الحضور
I want to
الكريم
thank everyone who made it possible
جدا.
for
أود أن أشكر كل
us to be
شخص
able to gather
حضر
today
معنا
here
وأيضا
virtually. It
آه،
is my absolute
بالفعل
pleasure
أنا
to
سعيد
be able
جدا
to
أن أكون
present
مستضيفا
today on
اليوم
behalf
في
of the
هذه
American
الجلسة
Library Association.
وفي هذا
And I will say, I
اليوم
hope
أيضا نتكلم
everyone
باسم
is well.
جمعية المكتبيين
So
الأمريكيين. سعيد
today I want to talk
اليوم
about meeting a
أود أن
challenge
أكون مع
of a
حضراتكم
lifetime
في هذا
during an
المساء.
unprecedented time. And although the title mentions times of crisis,
Do I answer questions?
I think we're good with the
Where do I answer
audio.
questions? One of the Q&A?
Michael, we're good with the
Yeah,
audio.
I see it, but I don't see how I respond.
Michael, are we good with the audio?
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
مايكل هل تسمعني جيدا؟
Although the title mentions times of crisis,
فيما يتعلق
I will share with you today times of opportunity,
عبر الزمن لدينا
engagement,
كثيرة
and
حتى
hope
الارتباط
for the
والارتقاء
future of
ونحن
library services in the
لدينا
US and around the
خلال
world.
هذا المؤتمر وهذا
The
العرض القيم
crisis, of
والموضوع
course, is the global
حاليا
pandemic, COVID-19.
جائحة عالمية
The
وبالفعل
opportunity is how libraries around the
فرصة
world
حاليا لنا
responded
حول
to
العالم
COVID-19.
وما تستمر والتي بالفعل كوفيد 19.
Next slide, please.
الشريحة القادمة تفضل.
So I want to touch on 4 key areas and highlight the work of the American Library Association and our members. And I want to talk a bit about communication because I believe the communication is one of the most important aspects of getting through any type of crisis. I want to talk about recovery
أو
and
الجائحات
safety,
وهنا نحاول أن
member
نتغلب
responses, what
عليها.
our members
أيضا
have
هناك
done during this particular time of being living through a global pandemic.
ونحن نعيش في
Our
جائحة
advocacy
عالمية
efforts,
الآن.
and I want to talk a bit about where we go from here moving forward. And I
ونحاول
hope to have a conversation with you all to hear what everyone around the world is doing to meet the challenges of a global pandemic and providing library services
حول
for
العالم
all. Next slide, please.
الشريحة التالية تفضل.
So the American Library Association
إن جمعية المكتبات أو
knew early on that one of the most important things that we could do would be to reach out to our members and stay connected. As early as the spring, we moved to an online format in a live setting using the existing technology, Zoom, as we are here now. And we were able to communicate to our members. And really, in the very beginning, it was to make sure that everyone was okay. Not just physically, but mentally, because this is a time of many different pivots, as we will see. And what we did was we came up with this idea to have the members and have members in our communities reach out to us and be able to have an opportunity to speak with the leaders of the American Library Association. We call it ALA Connect Live. We've been doing it almost every month since April. And many of the things I will talk about today, we have done using ALA Connect Live. We have connected to the members and shared resources through ALA Connect Live. I'm going to highlight those throughout this presentation. But it's really important that I set the tone and say that we knew, the American Library Association knew that we had to stay connected. We had to stay connected. We also knew the challenges of being connected. We knew that there are many parts of the world and certainly parts of our country that are not connected. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about our advocacy efforts. Of course, we have an organ called American Libraries, and we use American Libraries to stay connected with our members. And as you see on the screen here, you can see that we had a cover story, coping in the time of COVID-19. So we knew that it was important to be connected with our members, to try to provide as many resources as we possibly can. And just to make sure that folks knew that we're all in this together.
الأعمال من أجل
Next slide, please.
الشريحة التالية الآن.
So the other thing that we wanted to do was continue to provide content to our members. And we continue to provide new updated content that was relevant, that could meet the needs of what our members and what libraries were going through right now. It's all about now is the time to step up and provide service. So we had a series of webinars, and we talked about what many of our members and what many library workers around the country were doing, from presenting, making protective equipment, which we'll see some examples of later on, to being in a complete virtual environment and how you manage the work. So we have to lead the people and we have to manage the work remotely. And so we had webinars that will help our members be able to understand that certainly this is new, but certainly this is not something that together we won't be able to sort of move forward and continue to provide library services. We also had webinars because I think it's very important that for those who are in LIS programs, library school, I think it's very important for them to be connected because they will be entering into a world that is completely new from what they've been studying and of course new to us. So we also had webinars that sort of touched on students and access to technology. We feel that all of these types of webinars were very important as we were able to hear real stories from people, from members, and from library workers, from libraries across the country. And that was very important for us as we move forward and sort of created this new, what I call a community practice of sharing information. Next slide, please. So when we think about being in this particular time, one of the things that the American Library Association wanted to do is really think about recovery. And the idea of recovering, meaning library services had to pivot from being able to have people walk in our doors to being able to provide these library services remotely. So the idea is that in this time of recovery, in this time of what we call crisis or I call opportunity, we never stop providing services. Services have continued. There just has been a pivot. And when we think about what we're going to do to recover, we think about that in terms of safety. So we know that even today, the COVID cases continue to rise, deaths continue to rise here in the US. And we know that many institutions still have their doors closed to the public. But what we think about in recovery is, how do we provide a safe way to reopen? And what the American Library Association did was provided resources to our members on our website, ALA COVID-19 Recovery. And we thought about this in 4 key areas: advocacy and policy, which again, I will talk about shortly, but education, guidance, and protocols, and data research. So again, the association wanted to be a resource for its members as we think about recovery, but as we think about safely reopening our libraries. Next slide, please. One of the things that we also did is we collaborated. We collaborated with the Institute of Museum and Library Services for the Reopening Archives, Libraries, and Museums project. And this was a really important collaboration. We also took the opportunity to share with our members what this project was all about through one of our ALA Connect Lives, where we actually had the director of the Institute for Museum and Library Services, Crosby Kemper, on, as well as Sharon Streams, who works for Web Junction OCLC, to talk about how we are going to handle these library and museum materials as we live through COVID. And so we were able to, again, connect with our members and be this resource for them When we had the ALA Connect Live, I think it went really well because members got a chance to ask questions from the individuals who are sort of leading this whole idea of reopening archives, libraries, and museums and dealing with materials and mitigating the exposure to staff through the COVID-19 virus. Next slide, please. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about what our members are doing and the member responses. And of course, the American Library Association is sort of divided in the big areas where members join. So we have individuals who work in public libraries, and the Public Library Association serves those members. Academic libraries, we have the Association of College and Research Libraries, and of course, school libraries. And I'm going to sort of go through and touch on a little bit of what these organizations within the association have been doing to specifically focus on the members. So one of the things that we looked at with Public Library Association was beginning to just find out what is going on within these public libraries and how are they responding and reacting. And they were able to put up a myriad of resources for the public library activities. Next slide. The same thing with the Association of College and Research Libraries, where they specifically focus on the academic community. And again, they were able to sort of narrow the focus and find out exactly what are some of the needs within the academic library community, what are they doing, and how can we provide resources for them to deal with the pivot, providing services remotely, as well as keeping library workers safe in that environment. Next slide. And some of the things that the academic library community has been doing, and I just put a few examples here. At the University of North Carolina, they sort of pivoted being able to provide delivering materials by mail. Or at the University of California at Northridge, they began to collaborate to make these materials accessible and affordable. And we also see the same thing with the University of Hawaii offering resources for online teaching. And so we know that there are success stories out there, and we want to make sure that we highlight those success stories as the association, the American Library Association, tries to gather all of this information through those various divisions. Next slide, please. Okay, and so another major aspect or major division within the association is the Association of School Librarians. And I mean, this has been and this is something I think that we thought about really early on. So in August, we had a ALA Connect Live to communicate to the members. We had the president of the Association of School Libraries, Kathy Carroll. We also had the president of the Public Library Association, Michelle Jeske, and they spoke to our members about opening. And we wanted to make sure that our members understood the collaboration between school librarians and public librarians and how we can sort of continue to work together to provide this service to our communities. And it was really important that we were able to connect in that way. Here is just a snapshot of the role of school librarians during this pandemic. And you will see in this particular slide that school librarians certainly focused on collaborating, certainly focused on listening to be able to provide the type of service that the students will need as we are remote. And there are a lot of examples, and I'll get to some a little later, of what school librarians have done to be innovative and creative to continue to provide library services during COVID-19. Next slide, please. So one of the other aspects of the association and how we reach our communities is through state chapters. Of course, we have chapters in all of the states, as well as the District of Columbia and Guam. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight here is that the state chapters certainly had a role, and Michael Dowling helps lead our chapters as well as all of our international efforts. But the state chapters had a role and providing resources in their own communities. Here, we're giving you just a snapshot, two examples. One of the Illinois Library Association, reaching out to their members, providing talking points on how to sort of deal with the COVID-19. And then the other, and from the Indiana Library Federation. Here, it's a snapshot of a slide where they're talking about extending the Wi-Fi to many members in their community and through the public libraries and parking lots. And so we know that, and something the American Library Association has known for many years, that the idea of access is not one that is given to everyone in the US. And there were many who did not have access. And this is just an example of how that particular state chapter was able to lead those individuals in Indiana to be able to get access to Wi-Fi through their public library through extended Wi-Fi to the parking lot. Next slide, please. So holding space, this is where I kind of talk a little bit about the advocacy efforts of the association. And so holding space initially was a focus of mine as ALA president, where I wanted to sort of travel across the continental United States. You see the map here, and begin to talk directly to libraries, library workers, and communities that were often considered or still are underrepresented, under-resourced, and not necessarily having their voice heard in the broader spectrum of advocacy. And we had to pivot and have this cross-country tour that would have been by bus to be a virtual tour. And actually, we found that the fact that we went virtually actually was a better idea, because we were able to get more people involved. We were able to hear from more voices. And if we can go to the next slide, please. And we went clear across country, and we did this in late July, early August, and we were able to connect with these libraries and hear in real time what they were doing. So this is a slide of the Muskingum County Library in Ohio. These individuals here that you see are represent the mayor, the member of Congress. These are the elected officials from the local, state, and federal level, as well as the library director. And they were able to talk to us, again, in real time about how their library was dealing with COVID-19. And one of the biggest challenges that they had, of course, was access. Access, because this part of our country is fairly rural, and they had significant access issues. But as you see here, they also had a program of a drive and connect free Wi-Fi by going to the library and being in the parking lot. And this was so important to so many individuals across the country who didn't have access, because we found out that, this was their only way to connect to real resources, like applying for a job, or like getting benefits, or like being connected to go to school, because most schools were virtual. All right, so this was an opportunity for us to see in real time how people were impacted, and the response of the library, and how quickly they could pivot and use innovation and still have their community stay connected. Next slide, please. And we also went to Texas. Texas has the largest school library association, and we were able to connect with them again in real time. So this is right before school started, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to provide real services to the communities. And again, they're not even sure what it's going to look like, because even when we were in July, August, we still were just trying to figure out how to get a hold of this virus. We weren't sure what it was going to look like in the fall. But I mean, when we were able to visit Texas, we were able to see how the school librarians in Texas were collaborating with the public librarians, and they were moving forward, putting together programs on making sure children had access to reading materials. And that's what this particular slide talks about, the grab and go library and access to reading materials. And that was so important. But again, this is all in real time. They were developing this, and they were pivoting as we were going across the country virtually. Next slide, please. And so, again, we went clear across country to continental United States. We started in DC. We ended actually in Hawaii. But for the US part, we ended in Oakland. And we were able to visit Oakland, and we were able to see how the youth were still staying connected, right? In this particular library, public library, Oakland Public Library, they have what they call a youth poet laureate. They have a poet program. They are very focused, many programs on the teens. They were still able to provide some type of resources for the teens virtually. And in this event that we had with them, we were able to hear from the teens. They were able to read their poetry. We were really knocked out. But again, this is still about providing service during the pandemic where we cannot necessarily be face to face. And so this is another way that they in Oakland stay connected. I can tell you, if you go to the Delin, put that into the chat, the ALA Advocacy Holding Space, you'll be able to see and hear those conversations again in real time as we are all dealing with COVID-19. So next slide, please. So here's an idea that I just wanted to share with you. Beyond the pandemic, library is looking toward a new era. And this is about where do we go from here, and the roles that we will all play together moving through the pandemic. But even more important, it sort of makes us think about what the future will look like. What will the future look like, and what have we learned? And that's really the conversation now. So we know that as librarians, library workers, libraries have pivoted to continue to provide services for their communities. What we don't necessarily know is what is it going to look like on the other end? I mean, we want someday soon, we will get a hold of the virus and we will be able to connect. But will we have the resources for everyone to stay connected? And we know everyone doesn't have the resources to be connected. But it is about what will the role of school librarians or academic librarians or public librarians be moving forward. And I think, this has been an opportunity for us to be innovative, and we see that we can do so much more because we have done so much more when we were forced to do so much more. And so that's sort of like the question and the conversation. We know that we can pivot, and we know that we can be innovative and provide services. But how will that strengthen us as we begin to move out of this time of crisis and dealing with the global pandemic? And for me, that's the big question. And I'm very hopeful. So that's why I talk about hope. I talk about being hopeful because I believe that we come out of this stronger than ever. I believe that we come out of this global pandemic with a new sense of energy, to be connected, to seek opportunities for collaboration, to make sure that our communities have the type of services that they need. Next slide, please. So this slide talks about how, with the advocacy efforts of the American Library Association, where we were able to get money to the Institute for Museum and Library Services. That's the agency that sort of is able to give money out to libraries across the country. We were able to get money. We advocated for funds, and this is how some of the funds were divvied out. And so this is about pandemic response, professional development, and digital inclusion library projects. And that's one of the things that, as ALA president, I was very focused on, is the idea of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Of course, we know that this particular virus in the US has disproportionately affected people of color. And we know that there are a number of individuals or people of color around the country who are under-resourced and don't necessarily have access. And these funds were to take a look at specific areas around the country to sort of think about, how will we have programs to reach out to those underserved communities. And that is a part of the core values of the American Library Association, to reach out to all of our communities. And we also have as a focus or strategic direction to focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I was happy to see that the funds went to such a project, because I think that when we think about where we are on the other side of this and what this virus has really brought to light, again, many of us already knew that many of our communities were under-resourced and they were not connected. But now I think we all know that for a fact. And now we have money that's going to specifically address these issues. And for me, as ALA president, I was very happy to see that. I will say that I never considered being ALA president during a global pandemic, but I am happy to be able to serve libraries in our country and collaborate with libraries across the world, because I again believe that we come out of this a stronger library community, serving our citizens, serving our communities. And I think that is the last slide. Is that the last slide, Dylan? It is the last slide. So I'm going to stop here. I thank you very much for allowing me to share my thoughts with you. And I look forward to any questions during the question and answer period, which would be a little later on. So thank you so much.